Hello and welcome to What Lingers, the podcast where we uncover the questions behind people's stories. I am Christian Figueroa.
And I'm Liz Melchor. Together, we're the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, where once a month, 10 storytellers get on stage in front of 200 people and share true personal stories around a theme.
It's always an incredible night, but there is a catch. We always have lingering questions for the storytellers.
In our podcast, What Lingers, we get the answers. In our third season, we jump right in and take you back to that stage. You'll hear the original story told that night.
Then, we sit down with the storyteller for a deeper conversation to explore what lingers for all of us.
Just a quick note, since these recordings are from the actual stage, the audio might be a bit raw.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Hi everyone. When I studied journalism, they always taught us that you should pull the most captivating part of any story right up there to the lead. So with that in mind, hi, my name is Miguel, I am 29 years old, and I once stole a high school chemistry test by ripping out my own eye. I hope that got your attention. I will tell you more about that in a second, but first take a journey with me to a quarter of a century ago. The year was 1997, and I was an adorable toddler being fed soup by my dad in the outskirts of Lisbon. He noticed there was a weird twinkle in my eye, in the way the light reflected, but he didn't make much of that other than remembering that sometimes that same eye would flash yellow in pictures. As luck would have it, I had a pediatrician's appointment coming up and they mentioned it. I was immediately rushed to an ophthalmologist and then to an oncologist who would come to diagnose me to a couple of young, terrified parents. It was cancer, and it was advanced enough that the only viable option was to remove the eye. So we rushed to London, I had my surgery there, and that's when today's story truly began. My first memory ever, really, so the moment I came online to the world, is not a happy one. I vividly remember to this day sitting in my bathroom as a baby boy and seeing my mom just crying her heart out while removing bandages from my head. I didn't understand it then, of course, but she was seeing her baby son without his eye for the first time. And it was this boy. Yeah, that's the moment I was looking for. So, a happy kid, otherwise making cancer newsletter covers. Thankfully, I went into full remission, but then as a child, I started to grapple with the meaning of only seeing from one eye, only having one. Kids were sometimes mean about it, as kids will be. I would constantly bump into people and stuff because they were on my right side and I wouldn't process them. I still do that a lot. I would look weird in most photos unless I was looking straight at the camera because of course my normal eye moves and the prosthetic doesn't. And as I grew, my body grew with me, my head as well, but the prosthetic wouldn't, so it would feel small and uncomfortable often. And then the teen years hit. Now, I'm guessing a lot of you will remember those as a time of emotional turmoil, of concerns with your body, your weight, your skin, your crushes, and I do as well. I was a teen, but mostly I remember needing to find a strategy to not be defined as the one-eyed kid. And that strategy was being the funny one instead. So it's a regular coping mechanism for a lot of disabled people, I suppose. But I would make a lot of jokes about it, crude ones even. I would meet someone new and try and get it out of the way as soon as possible, so it didn't turn into a thing. And people would laugh and relax because, well, it had to be a light disability if I myself was making fun of it, right? But it really wasn't. It was all a show. I felt ashamed of that. There were a lot of stories who would remind me of what I had. I can tell you a couple. So I remember when Avatar came out, this was I think 2009, I went to see it with my friends and I loved it. I wore the 3D glasses and everything. It was only the next day when a news story on TV about the movie had an expert saying that, well, actually, people with only one eye, they don't perceive 3D the same as anyone else, or at all, really. And I was looking at the TV like, I just saw the movie. So I got to school and I asked my friends, guys, like, how did you experience the movie? And everyone was like, talking about these amazing effects coming out of the screen right at them. And I hadn't seen a single thing come out of that screen. So again, I laughed, and again, I was super sad inside. When I wanted to get my driver's license, it took 4 doctor's appointments to finally find a doctor who would sign on the mandatory physical test you have to take to get your license. I knew I could drive. I researched the law, and because my other eye sees perfectly, I could have my license same as anyone else. But no doctor seemed to have studied that until eventually I did find one who signed it, but every one of those appointments was sad and fucking humiliating. I was begging to be seen as the same as everyone else. And then there was this time in high school when me and my friends were miserably failing a chemistry class. So we decided it was time to take decisive action. We hatched a plan in which I would take my prosthetic out during class, because I can do that whenever I want. And I do sleep with it before anyone asks. I would take it out in class and I would pretend I was so ashamed to the teacher, and she had to accompany me to the teacher's bathroom so I could put it back on, because no one could see me like that. And while I did that, a friend plugged a pen drive into her computer and he stole the upcoming test. Now, after having negative scores all semester, we figured it might be a bit suspicious to suddenly have a perfect score, right? So very sensibly, we all had 19 out of 20, to be sneaky. So it was useful for the first time, if super unethical. But little did my friends know that fake shame that I had to the teacher, well, it was really easy to come by because it was real. I didn't actually have to pretend. Some years later in college, when I was getting to know a person who would become my first boyfriend, and we were flirting and everything, we had a lot of friends in common, and I would come to find out that he had made an innocent joke. He had made an innocent joke to some friends of his, saying like, he didn't know if he could date someone with only one eye. It was an innocent joke, if a very poor one, but nonetheless it stayed with me. Not always, not even often, but it had been said, and it was another reminder. So we come to just some years ago, really, when I was just chilling with a group of friends. We were all talking about nonsense, and someone thought it would be cool to talk about what everyone would like to change about themselves physically. So I immediately fell silent. It was mostly what you'd expect, right? Some people wanted to be thinner, some wanted to be taller, bigger boobs, smaller nose. And then someone actually remembered I was there. And she turned to me and was like, oh, I'm sorry, I know what you would like to change, right? And at that moment, something lifted off me. Ironically, it felt like seeing for the first time how I wouldn't want to have both eyes. Somewhere along the years, it had become such a big part of me, but somehow it no longer had any power over me. All of a sudden, it seemed like everything had actually only been in my head. And so that's what I said. I said, no, I wouldn't want to change that about myself, even if a transplant were available, which I don't think it is yet. I wouldn't take it. And so everyone fell silent because they weren't expecting that. Until someone asked me, well, what would you change about yourself then? And I said, well, my dad has these beautiful, deep green eyes. So couldn't I have at least gotten those? Thank you.
Miguel, thank you so much for being here with us at What Lingers. Thank you for accepting the invitation to come and talk about your story. We know you, of course, on the stage, but would you mind introducing yourself a little bit more for the audience listening at home?
Of course. I'm Miguel. I'm from around Lisbon. I grew up around the city. Now I am in Lisbon. I started out as a journalist a long time ago, but that hasn't been my area in quite a while. Now I'm in education. I used to teach Portuguese as a second language. Right now I'm in education, but under more of an administrative role. So no longer a teacher.
Because I've also had the experience, because you're a journalist and you've been a teacher. And I've noticed in storytelling that some of the people that are really like the most natural storytellers are teachers, because they have to stand in front of a class and they have to keep attention. And so it's like in some ways they have the most practice of anybody.
Oh, absolutely. I was teaching mostly to adults, but I think it's a fallacy to think that storytelling in a classroom is really for younger people, because well, grown-ups love stories just as much, even more, right? Much more leeway when you're telling stories to people who've had their own life experiences. So it was definitely interesting to, when I was teaching Portuguese, to match storytelling with teaching my own language.
And well, just jumping a little bit into your story already, what made you take the courage and share your story for the theme of pretend?
I really loved watching how people were engaging with the stories and how the storytellers were so free, just jumping on stage and telling their stories. And I remember at the end telling that friend of mine, he told me, like, you should join. You are a good storyteller. That's his words, not mine. And
I'm agreeing with him. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. And I told him I'm not opposed to it, but I'll wait for a theme that really connects with me. I won't just jump on the next theme, whatever it is. But as luck would have it, the theme after that really did connect with me. And as you guys know, I've participated in 2 editions so far. And for the second edition, which was much more recent, I just knew out of the bat what story I wanted to tell.
Do you want to share with people listening at home what that story was about? Because that story also has lingered for me. The parrot, especially the parrot. There's a parrot.
There is a parrot involved, or there was. That second story the theme was sex. It was really a fun afternoon in the end. Very long story short, it was a story of how I ended up having sex with a fairly well-known Portuguese celebrity, or not so much nowadays, I think, but a musician that used to be very big. But I only realized that in the end. So I didn't know while it was happening, or I wasn't recognizing him. But I was much more comfortable telling that story because, well, first of all, the theme is much lighter, if you will, than the story that I told. And also I had some experience because by that point, I not only had participated once, but I had also attended a lot more editions. So I was feeling a bit more comfortable. Plus the people before me were so good. I was really feeling energized to go on stage. That's that second edition. On the first one, I was just super nervous.
The sex night this year was amazing. And every story came at the theme in a different way. But yeah, I just loved your story. And the parrot. For everybody who hasn't heard this story, there was a parrot in the aging pop star's apartment.
That's right. In the bedroom, actually.
So it's just one of those magic details.
Back to what I was saying. The first time I was really much more nervous. I had never done it. I mean, you know the bullet points that you want to go through, you know, the things you want to share, but you're always scared that you might forget them and then that you might lose the thread to the story you want to tell. But that actually didn't happen because when I started speaking, everything kind of went silent in my head. I could really focus, and the audience was absolutely wonderful, you know, so respectful of the space, of the time, laughing when they wanted to. As time went by, I found my pace, you know. So sorry, Christine, I was kind of rambling back to your question. Why this particular edition? It had been something that I had been thinking about, and another good friend of mine that lives with me, so I think she would have asked me where I had been, so I just invited her. But I invited no one else because I really thought, well, I want this night to be for me. Well, for the audience too, of course, but I want it to be a moment when I can just
say whatever I want.
We talk about this a lot, that sometimes it can be easier to tell 200 strangers like your deep truth than to tell like that one person that knows you.
Yeah.
But also I understand it as like the journey that you talk about is something that I imagine has been really present with you, but it's also something that's been very internal for you, right? Like it's not, as you said, you haven't said it out loud. And so here you're basically getting to celebrate the whole arc of the journey and speak it aloud and be heard and seen. And that's very cool.
Yeah, it did feel like a beautiful ending to that arc because, there's nothing more to process anymore. It's just something I comfortably live with. That's part of me, It felt like wrapping up a lot of turmoil over the years just with I want to believe, beautiful story that I managed to tell the audience. But I still didn't invite anyone because, like you were saying, the people I would have invited would have been part of that journey at one point or another. We would have been talking about, childhood friends or family members, people who, through the years, I might have told that I was okay, with the disability. It really didn't affect me. And that wasn't true, So it's not so much that I was worried about being perceived as a liar, because I think that's a really strong word and not exactly what was happening there. But it was an inner truth that I wanted to share, well, first with myself and with the strangers that would be listening to me, and then later, as it happened, with everyone else, because I did share the story with my friends later and my family, and everyone was super supportive, of course. As this is also the reason why I had to invite around 20 people to the second storytelling event, because everyone forced me to, like, if I ever participated again, to invite them.
That's something really important. We had experience with storytelling in Lisbon that somehow our event become this container for our true self and for these probably heavy personal stories. I remember clearly one of the storytellers came up to us and he said, I have told something on this stage that I had never shared with anyone in my life. And that really stuck with me because I had the same experience with my HIV story, which is the final episode of the season 1. And then listening to you and your story, I'm wondering if this was the first time you shared your story publicly, and if you have shared the story more and more just because you did that as storytelling in Lisboa, and how your relationship with your own story has changed now that the story, as you said, is out there.
Well, I think the answer is yes to everything you said, in the sense that it was the first time I told it in such detail, from the beginning to the end, the full journey. From the moment I told it back in the event, I have gone deeper into my feelings about this whole journey with people, even if just because they watched the story, and they had their own questions after it.
That just reminded me of the boyfriend in the university, because he made the joke that hurt your feelings, but I'm imagining maybe in the moment you didn't really let him know that. And
no, I didn't. And I want to stress that it always did feel like an innocent joke. It did hurt my feelings. That's
of course. Yeah. I mean, it can be both, right?
Exactly. Two truths can exist at once. I didn't let him know at the time. Confidence, my confidence and my sense of self was very different back then, which is not on him and not on me either. I don't think it's on anyone, but the way I perceived it was, this is something that I can't change, but it's also something I don't want to talk about, So to breathe life into this issue when I'm meeting this person, this person that I like, and I'm sure you can understand, I didn't let him know that. I probably would have if I felt it had been mean-spirited. And then, of course, the relationship probably wouldn't have happened. But he wasn't that kind of person. He was a wonderful person. He is a wonderful person. I'm no longer with this person, but we keep in touch. We are good friends. But yeah, I didn't let him know. But it was, I think, a manifestation of a bigger problem, which was that I didn't let anyone really know when they would unwittingly say something that might be hurtful, and this went for family members, for friends, for strangers too. I just swept it under the rug.
And you were saying that now because you shared the story, it's like, well, Liz said something really beautiful on the final episode of season 1 with my story on HIV coming out, when you share your story, you allow other people also to talk about it and to dive deeper, because this is not only your story. You are intertwined with your family, your boyfriend, your friends, and they all make part of this story. So when you actually open that pot and be like, hey, this is what actually happened inside of this pot, and they're like, wait, what? I didn't know you were feeling like this. And they start making questions and they start bringing details and stuff. So how's that process going?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Not that I thought that people would react poorly because they had no reason to, but it was really interesting to see how some people would go like, yeah, I had no idea that you were feeling like that. Why didn't you say so? And then it's a problem that I felt like I imposed on myself over the years, because I was lucky enough to always be surrounded by loving family and friends. Well, I made that choice myself. I could have been honest at the time. I could have let people know that some things made me sad or hurt my feelings, and they would have accepted that and changed their behavior accordingly. It's sad to think about it because it would have made for a different childhood and a different way of living comfortably and freely, and maybe not worrying so much about hiding things that didn't actually need to be hid.
Yeah. Can I ask some logistical questions, actually?
Absolutely. I was expecting it.
Because, I have my own curiosities that there's this whole emotional part, but then there's also just this other part where you have a prosthetic eye. Okay, the first logistic question is actually the surgery, because you said you had to go to London for surgery. Did I hear that correctly? And you were living in Lisbon?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, why did you go to London for the surgery? And that really even makes it, already this was, I'm sure, something enormous for your family and for you, but you're 3 and you didn't come online yet. That's how you said it?
Exactly.
But that they had to go to another country so why London?
It was quite difficult. So at the time then you didn't have that surgery in Portugal. It wasn't a possibility. Okay. So I had to go to London. So we went there for me to have the enucleation, that's what you call the removal of the eye. Then I had my chemotherapy back in Lisbon, normal chemotherapy. But then London became a part of my life for quite a while because of this. Because not only did I have my surgery there, but I also had to go back there to get my prosthetic made every 5 years, more or less. I would have to go there because, like I said in the story, my head would grow, but the prosthetic wouldn't. So I had it refit every once in a while. And nowadays they do it in Lisbon. There are good professionals here too, but at the time, not so much. So if you wanted a good prosthetic, and I found out that they were actual works of art, prosthetics.
Yeah, and that is my next question. Is I'm really curious about the prosthetics. And okay, we always hear when we're children glass eyes. What is it? So what is your prosthetic made of? I'm imagining not glass.
It's not glass. I have been asked this question so many times. And you know what? I blame the pirate movies because
totally
it's not glass. So it's a specific material. It's like an industrial silicone kind of material, very, very resistant. What they did, so there are basically 2 ways that I know of, because I went through both of them, to have a prosthetic eye made. So the first one, which was what I did in London, is much more expensive usually. What they do is that they fill your eye socket with a material like not liquid, but like viscous material that hardens very quickly. So basically they are creating a mold of your eye socket that they will then use to make the actual prosthetic based on that, and this is millimetric work. Besides that, because there are usually 3 professionals involved. There's the physician, or the person who's actually making the mold and doing the procedure. Then you have a professional photographer who's photographing the normal eye under a million different lights.
Interesting. I wouldn't even think that you would have to do that. Wow. Okay.
Well, you don't necessarily have to, but that's how they did it. Let's call it a top-notch prosthetic. And then there's a third person who is the artist. So the person who is going to be painting the prosthetic with replicating the exact color and, the blood veins, everything millimetrically copying your regular eye.
But actually, question, because I would imagine it's not exactly an exact copy. They're just copying the vibe. Like
The vibe, exactly.
eyes are not exactly the same.
No. It's not symmetrical.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
What they do is, well, the color first and foremost, that usually is the same in both eyes. So they really work hard, so that the prosthetic reflects light in the same way, because as you guys know, our eyes kind of change color sometimes under different lighting. So they're working on that too, so that suddenly you don't have like a light flash in your eyes and then your prosthetic doesn't reflect it the same way as the other eye. So it's really a labor intensive work, which makes it super expensive. So that's one way to make it. That's how I did it every time I went to London. Then there's the other way, which is fine as well, but it's a bit more trial and error, which is how I did actually my last one. You go into the clinic, they don't do the mold. You try a bunch of different prosthetics, you see what feels nice, and then you're going there basically once a week for about a month to give them feedback. Maybe it feels a bit looser on one side, maybe it feels big, uncomfortable. So you'll go back and kind of make adjustments based on that. And then I think the color process is the same as the other. They also take photographs and everything.
To me, your prosthetic looks amazing. I mean, I don't notice it. Like you've told me, so now I can like stare and try and find it. But
I think my glasses are kind of reflecting you guys, but
I would never know which one is it.
Well, I only have to do this, which is like if I turn my eye, you'll see that one turns and the other doesn't. Whenever someone asks me what it is, I just start rolling my eyes to let them know.
You're like,
so I'm thinking of a little bit in the physiology, like the eye movement, it's controlled by several muscles inside the skull. And I thought that by now, like you would have the technology to attach those muscles to the globe.
Well, I don't want to be unfair because as the technology for transplants or other related things goes, I haven't really kept up, because it's not something I'm interested in. I do hope it becomes available, but it's not something I would be interested in doing. I care very much that the breakthroughs are there because some other people might want that option. But from my limited understanding, it's quite complicated to have breakthroughs in, well, I would say any kind of transplant, of course, but especially the eye, because your eye is connected to the brain via the retina, right? Which is where my cancer occurred. So what I had was a retinoblastoma, basically a blastoma in the retina.
And that's extremely rare, right? Especially for children.
It is quite rare. If it's detected early, the chances of a full recovery are good, but it's rare. So to basically functionally reconstruct that whole inner area of the eye, I think is quite hard. And what one doctor once told me, because of course I did ask about a transplant when I was younger, and what one doctor told me, and any listeners with a background in medicine, please correct me if this is absolutely wrong, was that if an eye transplant were to become available, it would be a long recovery period. So we say that, for instance, right now one became available and I wanted to do it. My brain has been functioning with one eye for more than 25 years now. So the moment another eye became available, there's no guarantee that the brain would even acknowledge it was there, okay? Because that connection has been severed 25 years ago. So something that could be done to counter that was to basically force the brain into using the new prosthetic, like the new eye, for a ridiculously long amount of time, to basically force the brain to go the other way. And then once you uncover the original eye, there's also no guarantee that the brain won't immediately just go back to that, So I don't know if this is perfectly accurate or not, but it just feels like something I'm not interested at all in going through.
Yeah, it's highly, highly complex.
Exactly.
And it sounds like it is. I'm having a second thought and like a deeper probably thought. You had it like when you were really early, so your muscles didn't even develop because the muscles, they grow
Quite possible.
with uses. So at this point, what I said earlier is almost impossible at this point. But yeah. Oh my God, yeah, science and
I think
all the things we have.
On a different note, I think it would also probably mean other issues that I would have to overcome. Because, for instance, there's one thing that I perceive differently as people who have both eyes. Mathematically speaking, and I'm sorry to introduce mathematics to a very interesting podcast, but I'll try.
Wait, stop. I love mathematics. I find mathematics interesting.
All right. I'm not a big fan of math in this. So when you see a graph, like a 3D graph, you have an axis that goes up and down, one that goes left and right, and one that goes front and back. This is how people have depth perception, the front and back axis, which I do not have because the eyes triangulate so that your brain understands the distance of things. And I don't have that. Of course, I understand perception my own way. I know how far the computer is from me right now. If I want to grab something, I just do it. But that's because my brain developed a way, which I cannot explain, to get over that problem. This means that, for instance, when someone throws something really quickly at me, say a ball in sports or something for me to grab, it's very unlikely that I will be able to grab it because my brain doesn't have time to, do those calculations to see how far it is from me and when do I grab it. This is all to say that if I suddenly had two eyes and my brain started doing that, going through that process that most people go through, it would probably mean additional difficulties in adapting.
It's like your brain has adjusted to having just one value and calculating that. So I'm assuming because you talked in your story about driving, and I always think of driving as, because you're always trying to sort of estimate how far the car is in front of you. And my guess is that you have a very good idea of how far cars are in front of you, but you're using other information. Even maybe you're not conscious of it. I don't know,
probably I'm not. Well, I'm a very careful driver. Okay. In over 10 years of having a license, I've never once had an accident. So
good job.
Well, I blew some tires, but that was because there were things on the road, not because, but I never had an accident. I like to attribute that to the fact that I always try to drive really carefully because I'm aware of this. There are simple things like when you want to check if there are cars coming up on your right, which is the side that I don't see. Most people will just have a quick glance at the mirror. I can't do that because, there's this whole, how do you call it? Like
blind spot?
The blind spot that you usually can kind of catch if you just turn your head a bit, and I can't. So I actually have to fully turn my head to see it, which means now, of course, my left side is left. But I came up with all of these strategies to make sure I was being a safe driver. I always keep a great distance or as much as I can between me and the following car. So in the end, like the law says, I could drive.
Yes, and you do. And one doctor finally signed your thing.
I still remember, I can't remember the other doctors or their faces. I just remember the experience of being there. But I actually do remember the last doctor because he felt so outraged, First of all, he was like, why are the other doctors wasting my time? Because they could have, just signed it. They're wasting your time, my time. You didn't have to be here. He was outraged with me. He was like, of course I'm going to sign this. Like, why wouldn't I? It's the law. He was really nice. It made me feel normal for the first time.
Seen. Right. You felt seen.
Ironically, right?
Yeah. And then, okay, one more logistical question that is what you really begin your story with. Let's go to this image of you ripping out your eye. So can you just put in your fingers and you can take it out? And would you do this often so you did it for the chemistry test, or chemistry? Was it chemistry?
I did. It was a chemistry test.
Okay, question. Did the teacher figure it out? Because I feel like the teacher, even though you guys had your little thing, 19 out of 20, I feel like the teacher still might have had some idea, right?
She was very suspicious, but she could never find proof. Well, this is proof if she ever sees it. So if you're hearing this, my chemistry high school teacher, yes, we did steal it. What happened? Well, first of all,
mystery solved.
She was a very poor teacher, though, so I don't feel sorry. It was a bad thing to do,
Stealing is not good.
Stealing was unethical, but yes, we did do it. So, first of all, what happens is I can remove the prosthetic really easily. It's a matter of 2 seconds. When people see it, outside of the eye socket, because sometimes I'm not offering to do it right now, but sometimes, yeah, I know. But see, that's the Christian's reaction is exactly what I was going for, because it's always the face that people do when I when I ask him if they want to see it, he's
For
done.
listeners, like Liz is super expecting for Miguel to take his eye out of the prosthetic eye, but I'm like scratching in my chair, like, please don't do it.
I'm not going to do it, don't worry. But what I will say is that for those who do want to see it, it's much less shocking than what you'd expect when it's okay. So basically, what you see is like a pinkish eye socket that kind of looks the same as looking inside your nose or your ear. So it's cartilage. You're not seeing blood. You're not seeing anything. You're just seeing a bit of pink cartilage. I mean, it is a surprising image because suddenly you're seeing a whole head without an eye, but the actual empty space is not that shocking. Had the most squeamish people actually go like, "Oh, of course, okay, that wasn't so bad."
Like, oh,
Yeah.
so what?
That's it.
I'm actually laughing at myself because I'm a veterinarian, so I've seen a lot of things. But the one thing I always knew it was that I was not good material for being a human doctor because I don't think I can stand the same amount of things in humans. And so when you said the cartilage and all these things, I have all these images from my classes and anatomy and necropsy, and we're like, yeah, I've seen this before. Why am I like afraid of a human body? But yeah, it's just part of my...
I don't feel it's that shocking, but I mean, who am I to say? You know, it's the other people who have to give their opinions. But yes, it is very easy to remove. And I'm sorry, but I forgot the original question, Liz, if you could help me out.
I think, yeah, just how do you remember it? You removed it in school? Then another just quick logistic question. And then I think I'm done with my logistic questions. Is it necessary to remove, to clean? You said you sleep in it.
I do sleep with it because I think people tend to think of people who have an eye prosthetic as people who have, you know, a denture. You know, you take it out and you put it in water when you're sleeping. That's not what happens. The prosthetic does need to be washed fairly regularly. You know, I probably do it once every 3 days, maybe 2 days. It's water and soap. There are specific liquids that you can use, and they're the same as the liquid you use for lenses, if you have it. It's the same kind of liquid. It's nothing specific. It's something you just get at the pharmacy. But most of the time, I just, you know, water and soap is perfectly fine because what you're doing is basically cleaning a surface that has caught, you know, a bit of dirt, but sometimes it can get a bit greasy, you know, because it's been exposed. So you want to wash that thoroughly. I do it more often in the summer because it gets drier because of the weather. So I feel more comfortable washing it more often. But, you know, in the winter, I can go like 1-2 weeks without doing it because I do have my natural eye lubrication. You know, when my eyes feel moist, they both feel moist, ironically, because, you know, the system is working. When I cry out of both eyes. So it's the system is fully functioning except for the vision.
I'm wondering if this is the first time you go to a place to talk about the specific details of your prosthetic. And if it is, I don't know if I feel sorry or if I feel like, yay.
No.
But actually, maybe that's the question. Like, how does it feel to talk about those specific details? And are these in some way annoying questions or welcome questions?
They're most welcome. I really enjoy explaining to people the logistics of it, you know, because people do have a lot of wrong ideas about what it is to live with a prosthetic. They make a lot out of it. And it's not something that is a lot of work. I am very glad to answer these questions. I will say that I have answered most of them a lot of times. So it's definitely not the first time I answer these questions. Maybe not so many in a row, but I do like it. Don't worry. I do like explaining it. I would be very surprised if you were to ask me something I've never been asked. But I encourage you to try.
I'm taking this as a challenge and like trying to search my brain. No, but I also think, and either agree with me or disagree, that there's because a lot of your story was talking about sort of the shame that you held on to, especially during your teen years. I think there's something also magical in just talking about like logistics and facts about these sort of shameful things, because one thing is to talk about the feeling part and that like can reduce the shame. But I also think just to talk about it like it's just a normal thing can also in some ways take away that this is something like weird or bad or I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it did. I think talking about the technical aspects of it was much easier than talking about the emotional aspects of it, you know, to explain to people, yes, I can take it out, or yes, I wash it. Those were things with a clean answer, you know, clean and quick. And people understood it. There were no follow-ups and more questions, but they understood every answer I was giving. That wouldn't have been the case if I started to go deeper into how I felt about having a prosthetic, or how I felt ashamed for the fact that I was different from my friends, for instance. That definitely would have invited follow-ups that I didn't want to get into at the time. And probably I also didn't have the emotional range to fully do it. You know, I was a teenager. Let's remember, my friends were also teenagers. So my family might have been very understanding, but I don't think everyone would have been, not in the sense that they would have been mean about it or they wouldn't support me, just that I came to where I am today because I am an adult who has had a full journey to think about these things and how I felt about them. I wasn't back then, you know. I was an emotional mess like all of us were.
All of us.
Yeah.
All of us, you know. I was going through all problems as well. This wasn't my only issue. We were all a little ball of mess and thoughts and problems, right?
Absolutely. And while most other people don't have a prosthetic eye, I think most teenagers have that thing that they feel shame about, or that thing that makes them feel very different than the others. And they're sort of wrestling with, like, how do I deal with that? Like, do I hide it? Do I use humor? You used humor.
I did.
Is that something that continues? Or now that you've had this more acceptance phase, is it reduced?
No, I like to think it does continue. I think it became part of my personality. It might have started because of that. And while in the story, I did say that it was kind of like a coping mechanism when I got into my teenager years. The truth is, or the bigger truth is, that I think it kind of started involuntarily before that, when I was a child. You know, those kids that are, in a sense, calling attention to themselves. But I think I was doing that not necessarily because I wanted the attention, but because I wanted the attention to be focused somewhere else when the subject was me. So I like to think I was a funny child. I was an intelligent kid. I think that unwittingly I was kind of trying to divert the attention from that very obvious physical trait that I had. And, you know, children will ruthlessly point that out about you. What you want to do is make it about something else. So that if you have to be the center of attention, it's because you are funny, you are doing pranks, you are telling jokes, you are also being mean sometimes. You know, I have some of those stories too. I not that I was a bully in any sense, but I kind of diverted the attention towards the wrong targets sometimes. You know, I was not perfect because it somehow felt better than to be joining other people in the fun about someone else, you know, be it gossip, be it mean-spirited joke. And it's definitely not something that I'm proud of, but I can see why it happened nowadays. I was, for once, trying to be just the same as everyone else, you know. It's just sad that that was the route, the chance.
And was there a point of your life when you kind of made this aware, like there was a consciousness about your condition, that, like, because you were growing so, I mean, you were so little, and then you're growing and growing and growing, and then it's like a point of your life when you're like, like, also because you're queer also, so it's like, I guess there were several points of your life of illumination. Like,
yes, there definitely were. We can definitely call it that. I don't think I can pinpoint a time when I became aware specifically. It just came naturally through interaction with other people. You know, when this happened, I was 4 years old. So pretty soon after that, I would be going to school, to, you know, my first grade and my preschool. So if I had to guess, I think I was probably made aware of this fact through, you know, interacting with other kids and, you know, getting asked that ridiculous question that's, what's wrong with your eye? It doesn't move.
And what was the illumination moment that comes at the end of the story, which is sort of that acceptance? And when you're in the group and people are like, what do you want to change about yourself? And everyone's kind of like casual. And then they realize you're there. And then they're like, oh, of course, we know what he would want to change about himself. And in the way that you tell the story, you tell it as if in that moment you really realize, wait, no, like I accept it. And is that accurate, that it really kind of crystallized into a moment? Or was it a process that you built towards this acceptance?
I think it probably had been building for a while without me realizing it. Part of this whole experience was that I wasn't critically examining my own thoughts about it regularly. Maybe if I was, I would have perceived much sooner that it no longer was such a big problem. But I tried to not think about it. At that moment, I was confronted with the inevitability of talking about it, because I was kind of between the sword and the wall. A friend of mine was specifically saying, oh, I know what you would want to change, right? So now I'm on the spotlight, under the spotlight. And it kind of clicked really naturally for me when this happened. For a second, I thought, well, what joke am I going to say? How do I, again, divert? But then I remember just thinking, what's the point? This is not, it's not affecting me like it used to, and it shouldn't affect me. So let's, for the first time, be completely honest about this. And that's what I did. I told them, no, I definitely wouldn't change that about me. Then I did divert with a joke. But I had been honest. You can't ask everything of me all at once.
Yeah, of course. But I think this might be a good time for us to end the conversation. But we do have a final question for you, Miguel, which is, how has it been for you revisiting your story today?
I loved. I would be lying if I said this was the first time I rewatched it. It's definitely not. I've watched me telling that story sometimes since it happened, and I always find something new to feel good about the experience when I watch it. I feel really proud of me. I need to be honest. I feel proud of me for having done it.
You should.
I feel proud that I was brave enough to share it with, well, not in the moment, but after, with friends and family, and to have those conversations as well. After that, I think it made the relationships all the stronger for it. So it's, like always, it made me feel really happy seeing it today.
That's it for this episode of What Lingers.
If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more listeners. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, we'd love for you to share this episode with them.
What Lingers is a podcast from the team behind Storytelling Lisboa, and is produced by both Liz and I, and edited by Liz.
We're a small project, and your support truly motivates us to keep going.
Would also love to hear from you. Feel free to send us a DM or even a voice note with your thoughts, your comments, or questions to our Instagram @WhatLingersPod.
Don't forget to subscribe and follow us so you never miss what lingers next.
Bye!
Bye!